Yuck. Nasty, stinky dish rags. They're awful. Hi, I'm Carolyn Sherlock, and on this episode of the Boat Galley Podcast, I'll give you my 6-step approach to keeping rags from getting stinky, as well as one good alternative. This episode of the Boat Galley Podcast is sponsored by Shambhala Sailing Adventures, offering customized learning charters in the Exumas, Bahamas. Sailor like you own her, with coaching from Captain Suki Cannon. Contact her at captainsuki@gmail.com. That's CAPTAINSUKY@gmail.com. And mention this podcast for 10% off your charter. Do you have nasty smelling dish rags? This seems to be always a problem for cruisers. Now, one way that I found to combat it is that a couple of years ago, a reader told me about these non-absorbent dish rags that just absolutely never get stinky. They're called scrubbers from Lunatech Gear, and I'm putting a link to those in the show notes. I love them. They do what they say they are. They're just not stinky, and they work so well to clean dishes. They've got just enough texture. But I still use a terry cloth rag to wipe things up. You know, the other ones aren't absorbent, so I need something that is absorbent. Well, my terry cloth rag gets stinky, although not nearly as quickly or as badly, since I'm not using it for everything. In talking to other cruisers, it seems that almost everyone has this problem. The good news is that you can do something about it. Thinking about it, I would have guessed that I had the biggest problem with my dish rags smelling nasty when it's hot out. But no, it seems to be in cooler temperatures that it's worst. Not only do my cloths and sponges smell nasty, but that smell transfers to my hands when I pick them up. Yuck! When it's hot out, even with the higher humidity, the rags dry pretty quickly. And it seems that they never dry out once it turns cooler. And never drying out is just part of the problem. What I learned was that I had to follow all 6 of the following steps. Skipping any of them would still leave me with stinky rags and sponges. The first step is rinsing the rag after every single use. Now I know when you're trying to conserve water, it's hard to bring yourself to rinse your rag every time. But if you don't, the bacteria will start to grow on the food particles that are in the cloth, and the food itself will start to smell as well. Ideally, you'd use a bunch of fresh water every time you rinse the rag. This just isn't feasible aboard most boats unless you're at a dock or in the tropical rainy season where you get your tanks filled with 30 gallons of water in a 10-minute squall. So instead, I keep a bowl with about a quart of water in it tucked into the sink, and I swish the rag around in it when I need to rinse it. If I add a couple of tablespoons of ammonia or white vinegar to the water, it works even better. Now, you don't have to rinse the vinegar or ammonia out. They just help to kill anything that would otherwise cause an odor. If I'm doing heavy cleaning, I'll change it several times. But otherwise, I'll change it first thing in the morning and then late in the afternoon and throw it out at night. Now, don't use the ammonia and vinegar together. One is a base and one is an acid, and they'll cancel each other out and cause a chemical reaction. Step 2 is wring the rags as dry as you can. The more water you wring out, the less has to evaporate to dry. Step 3, don't leave those rags wadded up. Air has to get to the rag to dry it. My sweetheart and I have had more than a few little discussions about this one, as he would just wring it out and then plunk it down on the counter. Now you have to proceed to step 4, which is hang the dish rag. Basically, you need to hang them so they are totally flat, not just like by a corner where they drape down. Put them over a faucet or a towel rack, something like that. Now don't hang it behind doors or inside a cupboard. That has to have airflow. The safety bar in front of the stove is one of the best places on our boat. Now for sponges, the best thing you can do is just stand them upright on edge. You're trying to expose as much of the surface as possible. The 5th step is to use some extra ammonia or vinegar at night. Right before going to bed, Add a little extra ammonia or vinegar to the rinse water and rinse the rag out one final time, wring it out, and hang it to dry. If it sits all night without being cleaned first, it will definitely stink in the morning. And finally, start fresh every morning. If yesterday's cloth isn't totally 100% dry in the morning, get out a different rag for the day. Let yesterday's cloth continue to dry. Now when it's completely dry, you can either put it in the laundry bag or set it aside for use tomorrow. Somehow, letting dishcloths dry totally before using them again seems to really help. I resisted it for a long time, figuring that if it was okay to use it again after it dried, why not while it was still a little damp? But it does seem to make a difference. Now, with the limitations on storage space on a 37-foot boat, I haven't had the luxury of using a totally fresh cloth every day. I always try to get 2 or even 3 days usage out of each one, and using these tips, I never really felt that I was using a nasty rag. My hands didn't stink either. A big side benefit to keeping the dish rags smelling sweeter and drying them thoroughly before putting them in the laundry bag was that the laundry didn't stink. And considering that we keep it in a cubby under the foot of the bed, this is pretty important. Now, one final tip. Should someone, I know it wouldn't be you, leave a rag wadded up on the counter overnight and you get stinky hands taking care of it, rub a lemon or lime over your hands or rinse your hands in some vinegar or ammonia water. This does a far better job than soap alone at getting rid of the odor. Thanks for listening to the Boat Galley Podcast. Be sure to subscribe so that you never miss a podcast. And of course, tell your friends.